I'll say good morning. It's morning as I'm taping this. I'd like to share some ideas about praying. I know that I'm not an expert on prayer. I don't think there are any of those in the world. But the book of Psalms gives us some insight into praying that I'd like to share with you. The book of Psalms is unique among the books of the Bible. I think it's generally the journey of the traveler on the road of faith. It reflects the entire gamut of feelings that believers experience. Sometimes the psalmist feels grateful, sometimes resentful, sometimes elated, sometimes he wallows in the pits of despair. Sometimes he feels supported by friends, sometimes he feels betrayed and abandoned. What he says is sometimes noble or exalted. Sometimes what he says is full of self-pity or hatred or revenge, just like real life. For example, the revenge psalms, we'll read one of those in a few minutes, have troubled believers for centuries. But I think the confusion is based on a basic misunderstanding of Psalms. Since it's the book of the traveler, it doesn't reflect the destination, only the journey. As such, if the reader treats it like an epistle, he might be confused. For example, sometimes the psalmist thinks the grave is the end. He's wrong. While in a way the Psalms are the word of God, in a way they're the word of man, but not just any man. It's the man of faith. What the psalmist does with his range of emotions is the point of the book. He keeps praying, just like Job did. He pours out his inner person before the Lord. He makes no effort to censor himself. He's not worried about hurting God's feelings. The entire book is an object lesson on cast your care upon him because he cares for you. How do I do that? Psalms. Whatever you're going through, there's a psalm for that. When Kathy and I went to Senegal a few years back, I learned that in Dakar, one would never walk into a hardware store and ask for a hammer. That would be rude. I should walk into the hardware store and say, bonjour. That's all the French I know. Then I should ask about his health and his family, even though we're perfect strangers. In short, the culture demands that I chat up anyone before I make my request. I was taught this is how I should always pray. I should chat up God before I ask for anything. For example, I was taught the memory aid acts: adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. Now, that's a good way to pray. But I have surprise for you. The psalmist often does not pray like this at all. Here's another surprise. Jesus did not pray like this in the Garden of Gethsemane. For my normal prayer life, this is appropriate. In a time of extreme stress, no, probably not. Even in Senegal, I would suggest no one chats up the ambulance driver. Psalm teaches us how a man of faith prays. Maybe this will be clearer after a few examples. I'm going to read Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors demanded of us songs of joy. They said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the songs of the Lord in a foreign land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy? Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations. Daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction. Happy is the one who repays you according to what you've done to us. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Wow. It's pretty clear the circumstances of the writing. For many Psalms, we don't know who wrote it, and we often don't know the circumstances of the writing, but this time we know the circumstances. This is an Israeli living captive in Babylon. It clearly reflects a mood longing to go back home again, hatred of those who had so damaged them, and a refusal to have any joy at all. Well, let's think about these people, who they are. Jeremiah has a lot to say to these folks. Jeremiah 24. Jeremiah has a vision. He sees 2 baskets of figs. I'll begin reading in verse 2. One basket had very good figs, like those that ripen early. The other basket had very bad figs, so they could not be eaten. Then the Lord asked me, "What do you see, Jeremiah?" "Figs," I answered. "The good ones are very good, but the bad ones are so bad they cannot be eaten." Then the word of the Lord came to me. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Like these good figs, I regard as good the exiles from Judah, whom I sent away from this place to the land of Babylon. My eyes will watch over them for their good, and I will bring them back to this land. I will build them up and not tear them down. I will plant them and not uproot them. I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord. They will be my people. I will be their God, for they will return to me with all their heart. But like the bad figs, which are so bad that cannot be eaten, says the Lord, so I will deal with Zedekiah king of Judah, his officials, and the survivors from Jerusalem, whether they remain in this land or live in Egypt. I will make them abhorrent and an offense to all the kingdoms of the earth, a reproach, a byword, a curse, an object of ridicule wherever I banish them. I'll send the sword, famine, and plague against them until they are destroyed from the land I gave them." Well, the captives, we find out, are in a good place. They're smack in the will of God, and God has good things for them. But the psalmist wishes he was back in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is no place to be. That would be much worse. Jeremiah 29. Jeremiah writes a letter to the exiles in Babylon. Here's what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile. Build houses, settle down, plant gardens, eat what they produce. Marry, have sons and daughters, find wives for your sons, give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in numbers there, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exiles. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and other diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies. Well, we see here it's the false prophets who say that the captives are going back home. Now, the plan of God is clear enough. The plan of God is that God has good things for them. They're going to live their entire lives in that place, and God's going to bless them there. Well, how does the psalmist in Psalm 137 feel about the will of God? The psalmist hates the will of God with every ounce of his being. What should one do when he finds the will of God to seem to be bitter and horrible? There's a psalm for that. Tell God about it. But don't be tactful. Don't be careful. No need to chat him up. Just dump out the venom on God. There have been times that I prayed like this. And it's quite different from talking to anyone else like this. There may be a small benefit to telling a friend how I feel, but generally it's hard to find someone to dump on who doesn't want to lecture me on my attitude. When I speak to others like this, it might even sour our relationship. But I've found when I pray like this, a healing begins. When I take my rage and vent it on God, my rage dissipates and sanity returns. Put this in your toolbox. When you need a voltmeter, a hammer isn't very useful. The Lord's Prayer isn't a very good fit on this occasion. You may need Psalm 137. Because if you always like the will of God, you'll be the first. Everyone else have days when they think the will of God stinks. When you hate the will of God, pray Psalm 137 and call Dr. Jesus in the morning. Consider Psalm 144. The premise of Psalm 144 is Deuteronomy chapter 28. And Deuteronomy chapter 28 is God saying to Israel, if you will be obedient to me, I'll bless you. Your children will be healthy. Your cattle will be healthy. Your crops will grow. And your enemies will be kept away. Well, let's read Psalm 44. We've heard it with our ears, O God. Our ancestors have told us what you did in their days, in days long ago, when your hand drove out the nations and planted our ancestors. You crushed the peoples and made our ancestors flourish. It was not by their sword that they won the land, nor did their arm bring them victory. It was your right hand, your arm, and the light of your face, for you love them. You're my God and my King. You decree victories for Jacob. Through you we push back our enemies. Through your name we trample our foes. I put no trust in my bow. My sword does not bring me victory. But you gave us victory over our enemies. You put our adversaries to shame. So far, so good. In God we make our boast all day long, and we will praise your name forever. Now we're going to get to the gist of it. But now you have rejected and humbled us. You no longer go out with our armies. You made us retreat before the enemy, and our adversaries have plundered us. You gave us up to be devoured like sheep and have scattered us among the nations. You sold your people for a pittance, getting nothing from their sale. You have made us a reproach to our neighbors, the scorn and derision of those around us. You have made us a byword among the nations. The people shake their heads at us. I live in disgrace all day long, and my face is covered with shame. At the taunts of those who reproach and revile me because of the enemy who's bent on revenge. All this came upon us, although we had not forgotten you. We had not been false to your covenant. Our hearts had not turned back. Our feet had not strayed from your path. But you crushed us, made us a haunt for jackals. You covered us over with deep darkness. If we'd forgotten the name of our God or spread out our hands to a foreign god, would not God have discovered it, since he knows the secrets of the heart? Yet for your sake we face death all day long. We're considered as sheep to be slaughtered. Awake, O Lord, why do you sleep? Rouse yourself, do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and oppression? We are brought down in the dust. Our bodies cling to the ground. Rise up and help us. Rescue us because of your unfailing love. Well, how does the psalmist feel? Abandoned? Forsaken? What does the psalmist say about God? He's unfaithful. He's unjust. He's arbitrary. He's capricious. He's unfeeling. He's asleep. Do you sometimes feel like God owes you something but isn't paying it? He's not carrying out his end of the bargain? Could you see yourself ever praying like this? Confronting God and accusing him of unfaithfulness? If you find these sentiments offensive or unacceptable, it might be because you've believed a lie about praying. Most of us learned that we should always speak reverently and respectfully to God, preferably in the King's English. But Psalms contradicts that. The fact about prayer is that one should always be brutally honest with God. Speaking reverently and respectfully is the wrong thing to do when it's a dishonest thing to do. It is not only okay to yell at God, it's required if you're angry at him. Romans 8 quotes from verse 22. So it must be part of the believer's experience. Maybe you don't feel abandoned right now. Well, then don't pray this prayer right now. But put it in your toolbox. You don't always need a pipe wrench, but when you do, a screwdriver is useless. This prayer is the path of healing for someone who feels that God has not been fair to him, and he feels unjustly forsaken. Everyone else will probably counsel you not to feel this way, but God doesn't do that. He hears, then he heals. It's a human tendency to stay away from God when we are angry, but this is so wrong. It's like staying away from the doctor when you're sick. Now, I'd like to look at a different kind of psalm, but I think it's the point I would like to share with you this morning. It's Psalm 3. It says it's a psalm of David when he fled before his son Absalom. He's fleeing before his son Absalom as a direct result of his own sin. That vile thing he did with Bathsheba and murdering Uriah, it's all come around and come down on his head, and he's getting what he deserves. He's been run out of his home, and he's running for his life before his own son, who wants nothing more than to murder him and to take his throne. Here's David's prayer. Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. Yeah, but you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call out to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy mountain. I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear, though tens of thousands assail me on every side. Arise, Lord, deliver me, O God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw. Break the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. What I see in this prayer is it's the effect of a brutally honest prayer. In this psalm, David describes the experience of one who finds peace in the midst of shame and sorrow. I'm familiar with shame, and I'm familiar with guilt. And generally, shame and guilt tends to keep me away from the throne of God. And the psalmist teaches us that's so wrong. Somebody like me would look at David and say, and he's getting what he deserved. He's not going to find a hiding place in God. But boy, would I be wrong. David knows the secret. God is a hiding place. Maybe everybody knows God's a hiding place. But did you know that God is a hiding place for the most despicable, the most vile, the most worthless, the most rebellious? God is a hiding place for those folks. Those are the folks like me. Those are the folks that can find peace, who can find a hiding place, who can find that God is a shield for the despicable. In this psalm, the fear is gone, the conscience is clear, and David sleeps like a baby. How does that happen? He's found God to be his hiding place. Remember how Job talked to God. He accused God of all kinds of vile things. But James says we should imitate Job. He did good. Well, my conclusion is this. First conclusion in Psalms, whatever you're going through, there's a psalm for that. My second conclusion in Psalms is that it teaches us that you don't have to wear kid gloves when you talk to God. You don't have to pull your punches. If you're angry, vent your feelings without censoring them and just dump them on God. And keep it up. And what you'll find is that a healing will roll in. A calm will begin to appear. And your spirit will begin to be lifted in an inexplicable way. One of the things that the book of Isaiah says Jesus does is he turns mourning into dancing. I think this is the process. I would encourage you and me to learn how to pray honestly and to let my prayer reflect my life and then give God a chance to heal me.